Jim Marston signing in.
Thanks, Jim. This is Greta. I've hard muted folks just until we get started here in 1 minute. Thank you for signing in.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I just wanted to jump in before we call the meeting to order officially with a housekeeping detail. During public comment, members of the public, please do use the raise hand function in your control panel, which we've highlighted here on this slide. I'll call on you in alphabetical order. I'll ask you to quiet any background noise like radios or TVs, and then I will unmute you. You'll have a maximum of 2 minutes to speak, and we will have a timer that runs just to kind of help guide your comments. And then once you're done speaking or at the end of 2 minutes, I'll go ahead and mute you again, and we'll continue with the next public speaker. So another quick note, please turn off your camera when you're not speaking, just so we can focus on the speaker at the time. So thank you so much.
Okay, this is Paul Spealler, the chair, and I'd like to call to order the roll call. For roll call, I will call the board members' names in alphabetical order. If you have a camera, please turn it on briefly when I call your name. Jose Barajas. Jose, can you turn on your mute button?
There we go. Present.
Okay, thank you. Jeff Hornbuckle.
Present.
Nick Koons.
Present.
James Langhorne. James, I think you need to turn on your mute button as well.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, you got it.
Wow, takes a minute. I'm present.
Okay, thank you. John Maloney.
Here.
Okay, John Maloney's present. Jim Marston.
Did you hear?
Jim Marston. Okay, Jim Marston.
Jim Marston here.
Okay, Jim Marston present. Paul Spealler present. Okay, we will now open for public comment for anyone wishing to speak about items not on this agenda. Please note, due to time constraints, each person may be limited to 2 minutes. Do we have any speakers from the public that would like to comment?
Chair Spealler, board members, this is Greta Walters. I don't see anyone raising their hand for public comment.
Okay. Let me give them a minute here to, just so we have some extra time for those if this is the first time. Okay, Greta, still no hands Raised
No
hands?
hands raised. Nope, no hands raised.
Okay. We will now close public comment and move on to the first subject item. Okay, our first and only subject item for this meeting is 7 West Figueroa, ratification of hardship for an elevator exemption.
Sorry.
Since-
Sorry, this is Greta. Sorry, Chair Spealler, just a point of order. We do need to approve the minutes for the February 6th meeting.
Yes, you are right. Sorry, I jumped the page. All right,
No
okay,
worries.
here we go. So we're closed, public comments closed. Now we have approval of the minutes for the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals meeting of February 6, 2020.
Jim
Are there any-
Marston moves that it be passed.
Okay, are there any comments from the board? And if so, unmute yourself and use your camera if you have one. If you don't have a camera, just please announce your name before speaking. Okay, Jim, can you make your motion again?
I move that we accept the previous minutes.
Okay, and do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, seconded by Nick Koons. Motion carries. Now we're going to call for a vote on the February 6th minutes. Okay, we'll do it again as all in favor say aye when I call your name. And then turn on your cameras so we can see you. Jose Barajas,
Aye.
Jeff Hornbuckle,
Aye.
Nick Koons,
Aye.
James Langhorne,
Aye.
John Maloney,
Aye.
Jim Marston,
Aye.
Paul Spealler, aye. Motion carries with unanimous decision.
Mr. Chair, I do have an announcement.
Okay,
So board members, Mr. Chair and board members, we're going to hear an item here that is a hardship ratification. And the ratio of physically disabled to non-physically disabled board members should be 2 to 3. And we have Nick and Jim who are going to serve to represent the accessibility community. So we are asking that, it's kind of awkward, but we're going to ask that 2 of the other board members other than Jim or Nick or Paul offer to step down and just listen to the hearing item and be available if there's any issues that transpire and they need to come back and be heard again next month. We have-
I'll accept that.
Well, what's that?
You guys are fast. Too.
John and Jeff, did you volunteer for that?
Sure. I'm happy to.
Okay. All right. So you're welcome to listen. You will not be able to comment though, because you can't influence any decisions. But it is important that you listen just in case this item does come back to us and you are one of the 3 other members in a future hearing on this item.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll stay on the line.
Great. Thank you.
okay, thank you, Chief Building Inspector. Are there any other announcements from the board or staff?
No.
Okay, great. So we're done with the announcements. This brings us to our first subject item, 7 West Figueroa, ratification of hardship for an elevator exemption. Since this is our first online Board of Appeals meeting, I would like to present the format that this will be followed considering this agenda item. First, we will hear from the city staff for presentation of the unreasonable hardship that has been approved by the chief building official. Next, we will recognize the applicants Shanna Morris and Louis Rayborn of Nelson Worldwide to present their request to ratification of the hardship. The board may then question the applicants and staff. When the board members are finished with questioning, we will open for public comment, and then public comment again will be limited to 2 minutes. Our meeting moderators, Greta Walters or Maria Sanchez, will check their control panels and will call on public speakers in alphabetical order. And speakers will be asked to state their name and have a quiet setting to limit background noise. After public comment, the board may question the staff or applicant. Next, a motion from the board will be made to affirm, deny, or amend the chief building official's decision to approve the unreasonable hardship. Then the board needs to second the motion. Okay, that starts. So we're now ready to begin, and I'd like to recognize the chief building official for presentation of the agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Andrew Stuffler. I'm the building official for the city of Santa Barbara, and I'm representing Elizabeth Sorgman, who's one of our certified access specialists. Elizabeth is ill on sick leave today, so she couldn't make it. So in covering for her, I don't want to, I expect that the board members and members of the public have read the staff report that was prepared by Elizabeth, and it's dated February 20th, 2020. It's attached as a handout to this webinar. The 2020 05 07 May 07 2020 staff report is the name of the handout if you want to look at that. Hopefully you already have. And I would just like to point out that the primary issue, the primary factors that lead us to approve unreasonable hardship request is that we've addressed the board's decisions from the December 6, 2019 meeting. We had two categories of concerns: signage and accessibility to restrooms. And that is on page 2 of the staff report. That's addressed. And then on page 3, the cost of anticipated construction contemplated and the impact of the code mandated access improvements on the feasibility of the project. This is one of those situations where they can provide 9.4% of the project budget towards accessibility path to travel improvements, but to go to the next improvement that's necessary in the path of travel, they jump from 9.4% to 292% of the project budget. And we feel that's clearly an unreasonable financial hardship, not what the code intended. It's by a factor of 10 or more greater than the 20% minimum the code requires. I would also add, and it's not in Elizabeth's staff report, but I'd like the board to be aware of the definition of technically infeasible in the California Building Code. It's an alteration of a building or a facility that has little likelihood of being accomplished because of the existing structural conditions, and they require the removal or alteration of load-bearing members or member that is an essential part of the structural frame, or because some other existing physical or site constraint prohibits modification or addition of elements, spaces, or features that are in full and strict compliance with the minimum requirements for new construction and which are not necessary to provide accessibility. In this case, if you look at the December 2019 report from the structural engineer that was provided to us, and it's in the staff report. I don't have the pages numbered in the staff report, but it is, let's see if I can figure it out here. Mr. Tosca's report. There it is. 1, 2. It's dated December 16th, 2019. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26.
Andrew, it says page 32 on my PDF.
32, yep, thank you. So page 32 of the staff report. And that clearly documents a technical infeasibility as well. Technical infeasibilities do not need to come before the Board of Appeals. So I want the board to know that depending on the decision the board makes today, we may consider this technically infeasible if someone makes that request to us after the decision of this board. And with that, I will stand by the city staff report and I'm available to answer any questions.
All right, are there any questions for the from the board to the building official? right, there's no questions from the board to the building official.
I have a question. I need a minute to get to that page 16. But maybe the chief building official could clarify for me quickly. What is it that we're evaluating as technically infeasible, the elevator shaft? Or is there some other component of the project?
When we look at the engineer's report, he discusses the structural walls that have to be modified and the loads that are imposed that would have to be accounted for if the elevator shaft was modified to fit the larger car.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Jim Langhorne.
Yes, Mr. Langhorne, you have the floor.
Just a simple question. Is this project, this proposed project, just a portion of something, or is it all, is this the whole project? Are we going to see more pieces come, is what I'm asking.
This is Hannah with Nelson.
Mr. Chair, I think just as a point of order, that'd be a good question to ask the appellant, and they'll be the next speaker.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Jim, we'll hold that question, ask that later. Are there any other more board questions for the chief building official or
Mr.
staff?
Chair, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Jose.
In the permits that preceding the 3-year cycle, was any work done at the second floor that has the elevated office suites?
Yes, I believe that was in the prior permit that they referenced from 2015.
And follow-up question, would that be considered part of the area of alteration for path of travel on those previous permits?
It was, yes.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other board questions for the staff? Okay, at this time, the chair would like to recognize Chana Morris and Louis Rayborn of Nelson Worldwide to present their request for ratification of hardship.
Hello, this is Hannah. Thank you everybody for your time today. And really, I'll just be reiterating what Andrew so keenly put. This project really was just a small alteration, and unfortunately, we can't alter the building to increase the size of the elevator cab beyond what is existing. It just structurally would take a lot of work, and it would really affect the essential components of the building. So we don't believe that we would be moving forward with that, or we can move forward with that without reworking the building entirely. Outside of that, the other components that were mentioned in the previous board meeting were the signage and the restrooms. As is shown in the report that Elizabeth put together, the signage has now been installed. And the restrooms will be fully brought up to date. Louis can add a little bit in terms of the small inefficiencies we have for the restrooms being fully up to code. But that work is ready to happen. We just got shut down because of the virus. So as soon as everything is opened back up in the city, we'll have our contractor on site to complete those small items. Louis, can you go into a little bit of detail in terms of what we have for the restrooms? Oh, we can't hear you, Lewis.
So there are some modifications to the reach distances for several of the items within the restrooms. Paper towel dispensers. We had the proper floor space for turnarounds. In most cases, we are going to have to modify, I think it was 2 walls, an end wall, so that we could have proper turning radius for the restroom. And then also we were going to take a swing door out and add an ADA compliant barn door type hardware for the door, I think, going into the men's restroom. And those were some of the components, but we were able to bring it up to what we consider full ADA compliance regarding reach distances, fixture heights, and the turn distance, turn radiuses for handicapped accessibility. Is that correct, Hannah?
Yes. You
Yep.
put that very eloquently. Thank you.
Okay.
So with that, I feel like we're really going, or IWG is really going above and beyond with what they can do to really accommodate everyone. IWG outside of that has also implemented a training program for all of the folks that are going to be working in the Santa Barbara location. That includes education on accessibility in general, and also a process for accommodating anyone who comes to the center who has mobility issues, in terms of providing equal facilitation. So everybody who will be on staff at that center will be trained, and outside of that, their operations manager will be owning that training as well. And we've provided that. It's included in the staff report that Elizabeth put together. I think that's just a general overview of where we are. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
All right, thanks, Shanna and Lewis. So we now are the board members now may ask the applicant questions. Are there any board members that wish to ask a question?
This is Jim Marston. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jim, go ahead.
I have a few questions. One, thank you for the training, but what are your plans for when new people come on board? Is this going to be part of their orientation every time?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and where is that documented?
So in the presentation, I believe it was included in the report. That presentation is part of their orientation for working on site. Okay. And once that training has been completed, each employee will sign off saying that they've completed that training. Okay. And I believe they will be refreshing that yearly for folks. Even if they've done it when they first started, they'll be refreshed again. And as things change with code or anything, those individuals will be knowledgeable and be able to accommodate those who come to the center.
My concern was not for the initial group, but when someone else comes in real quick. Could I still be heard? I just lost something.
Yes. Yes.
So as soon as a new employee comes in, they're going to learn this stuff?
Yes, correct. It's part of their onboarding process. So as soon as they come in, and they have a small network of employees who work between centers. And any of those employees who would be working within the Santa Barbara area or would be servicing that area would receive that training. So even if they were, say, going to work in one of the LA locations and then they came in to work in Santa Barbara, they would still be required to do that training and have that documentation on hand, and that will be in the center and also kept digitally for file maintenance.
Thank you. I have a few questions on the signage. Do you have one inside the elevator?
Yes.
Okay. I'm visually impaired, and I noticed that there's no disabled placard, the blue wheelchair symbol on the sign. So I'm afraid that people maybe won't have your attention drawn to the signage. I know you have lots of signs there, but I wondered, am I missing something?
Well, I mean, we do have the text is also provided in Braille. So
I'm talking
it's
about seeing the sign in the first place, knowing that it's something that you should read. As we know, with the virus, there's all sorts of signs on every store you go to, but I don't think the majority
This is
read every
true.
sign. So
This
my
is true.
point is could there just be the wheelchair symbol on at least one of the signs downstairs so that a person in a wheelchair knows, hey, I should read this one?
Yeah, I see no problem with that.
All right.
We can definitely add that just as an additional placard to draw people's attention to it. And
All
I
right.
can coordinate that with IWG. I see no issue with adding that. And we can, I will have to verify how quickly we can get that produced because everything's very strange right now in terms of getting products on site. But I'll verify that and we can get that installed. That's something that we can have the local team install, I believe.
And one last thing, which isn't really up to the appeal, but do you have a website that shows how to get to your place by a car, like where to park and all that stuff?
I believe if you go to regis.com and you look up the Santa Barbara location, it gives you a little Google map to get to the
So my suggestion is for people who don't drive and use public transit, you're very close to the main bus station. And this is not part of the appeal, but it'd be nice if your website could show how to get there from the bus station.
Okay, it may have that information on there, but if it doesn't, I'll talk with IWG and see if they can add that into the information
All right.
blurb.
Thank you so very much.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Are there any other questions from the board members to the applicant?
Nick, are you
Sounds like
next?
a few of us queuing up here. I do, thank you. So Hannah, I noticed that that a CASP was hired. Was this CASP hired to complete a CASP report?
Yes, he was originally, and we do have a copy, I believe, of that report included in the report that Elizabeth put together. And we did consult with him as we went through finding these solutions more
So
recently
I just
as well.
want to point out that what is in the staff report is not a CASP report. What you have here, so this is a, in my opinion, it circumvents the intent of the Certified Access Specialist Program. It's a very specific report. And this is not that. This is, in my opinion, this is paid advocacy, and the rest of the board should recognize it for such. It's perfectly legal, but I find the practice dubious. You see that the scope of work includes, Chief Building Official Stuffler, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to make a point that the building department does not collect staff reports for specific reasons. Those reports are private reports that the parcel owner, the business owner has control of. Even the state of California doesn't receive a copy of them in their CASP program. The state just receives a letter saying that a report was generated. The reason for that is once it's submitted to the government, it becomes subject to public records disclosure. And if there are elements of a building that are deficient, it opens the door for people to find those and then exploit by finding their way to the areas that aren't accessible and then making a claim. So you will not see a CASP report submitted to accepted by Building and Safety as the CASP report that you are speaking to.
Fair enough, but I think that it's still a fair point that what is included here is not the CASP report and should not be given such merit.
We in the building department do ask applicants to engage with certified access specialists. We encourage them to do that. And we encourage their certified access specialists to do an evaluation and submit it to us so that we can see what their perspective is.
Okay, thank you. I see the scope of work includes alterations to the third floor restrooms, as well as the 4 office suites that were raised from the primary portion of the second floor. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So we added on the scope for the restroom work so that we could bring that up to full current compliance.
That's great. I appreciate that. Am I correct in remembering that that had previously been deemed technically infeasible?
For the restroom work?
Yeah, I seem to remember that was on a previous discussion that it was thought to be infeasible or a hardship. I could be wrong.
The only thing I could think of, because I don't think we had a restroom scope previously, but there was some discussion around the like moving the entry wall for those restrooms at one point in time, but we couldn't because those are URM walls, and so that would really work against the structural components of the building. But in looking at the interior of those restrooms, with removing that divider panel for the men's restroom and turning it into a single use, I believe, we are able to eliminate the door and sequence issue, which was what was coming up there. So maybe that's what you're
maybe that
calling.
might be it. I see that you're seeking a hardship for both the elevator and the entrance on the access compliance checklist. Is that correct?
Yes, we did do some work at the entrance, but we couldn't put in a full ramped entry because there's existing tile there, that historic tile.
Chief Building Assessor?
Yeah, let me also add that the city does accept power actuated door opener devices in lieu of making an entrance accessible, especially on historic buildings. So in this case, that's what we did, and it wasn't considered, I don't believe it was technically infeasible. I think it was an alternate method of compliance that we approved.
Okay, fair enough. I will note that it's commendable that you found an alternate method for less money, but the cost of full compliance would have fallen into your 20% budget here, it appears to me. Access compliance checklist estimated that value within your budget, but great that you saved some money, and I'm glad that the bathrooms are being brought up to standards. I don't see that you're seeking a hardship to make the raised offices on the second floor accessible, but instead offering equivalent facilitation. Why is that?
Well, when we originally opened this center, we tried to fit a, I'm sorry, the word is escaping me, a lift, basically, that would transverse those stairs from the lower level to the higher level. But it wouldn't fit. We just didn't have the space to make it work, as you know, it's a historic building and it's it doesn't allow a lot of flexibility.
The historic code would only apply to exterior. So what means to provide access have been evaluated here?
So we explored doing that. We explored seeing what would happen in terms of how we could do any type of ramping, but that was not feasible also because we would be eliminating basically the space that you would be accessing because of how big the ramp would be. The lift couldn't fit just because of it's an older building. The stairwells are very narrow, so we couldn't do that. And that would be, we would be also butting up against that URM wall, which we can't remove because it's structurally essential to the building. So we explored all that with the original opening of this center. And then this project, because it was within that 3-year mark, we were just reworking some offices to allow a little bit more more office space, well, more offices, and this was lumped into it. So when we came into this project, the original project was brought back. So that's kind of where you're seeing that differential in the money, because when we originally built out the project, the budget was, I think, something of $300 something thousand, and then we've brought on another $100,000 with this new project. So it's kind of the melding of the two, and that's maybe where you're seeing that change. But we also, in terms of just trying to see what we could do with those spaces, we're always trying to make sure that the lower level, which is fully or mostly accessible, is equal to that which is up at the higher level.
Chief Building Official Steffler, you had a comment?
Yes, I'm not sure it's applicable, but I just wanted to note that the historical building code regulates any element that is of the building that's considered to have historical significance. So sometimes the interior or towers that support the supporting structures for towers, which can be interior, are historical elements. So just as a matter of clarification, it's not limited to exterior.
Okay. Stand corrected.
Thank you.
I see that you had once estimated the cost of a lift there at $58,000. That was on your access compliance checklist.
Yeah, that's the lift that we were trying to put in to transverse that small set of stairs that goes from the intermediate to the higher level.
So I have a quick question for Chair Spealler and his structural engineering expertise. Unreinforced masonry, by its nature, is not necessarily something that can't be removed because of the structural integrity of the building. Is that correct? People cut holes through
Yes.
URM all the time.
There's always a way to engineer something.
Yeah. That's what I thought. And so I'm concerned that an opportunity is being overlooked here to save a couple of dollars. And I'm also concerned that it could be done within the 20% minimum expenditure. Thank you, Chair Spealler. That's what I needed clarification from you. So I'd like to better.
Nick,
Yeah,
one question. Are you talking, you're not talking about the elevator now, you're talking about the interior stairs on the second floor?
Correct.
Okay.
Just past the stairwell into the first hallway of the tenant space. To the right, there's a 5-step rise to an elevated office block. And the appellant says that it's not technically feasible to install a vertical or incline wheelchair lift there. And I have to question that. I think there was more room prior to the previous alterations, but I still think there may be room now, and I'd like to see some confirmation that this is not technically feasible. And I'd also like to see some competitive cost analysis, because even at the $58,000 that the appellant estimates, that would still only put them at 22% of the budget. And that's only 2% over the 20% minimum required. So while I'm prepared to support begrudgingly support the ratification of a hardship of the main elevator. I feel that we owe it to the disabled public to take a closer look at whether or not we can provide the access to this elevated second floor office block.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I have a couple comments on the engineering. So if I'm on page number 60 of the package that was sent to us on the PDF, and it's the second floor plan. And I'm looking at the two areas where we have stairs going to that upraised area, and the wide walls that are shown on the plan, they look to be maybe 4 times as thick as the normal non-bearing partitions. Those would be indicated as the unreinforced masonry wall. So those flank each side of these raised of these stair areas going to the raised area, raised floor area. So that would require a substantial structural modification to put, maybe to do the lift if you could find the space and some adjacent offices for that lift. So there would be, a substantial structural modification for that. So that was my comment.
I don't think that we need to find office space. I think there was space next to the stairway, but they turned into an office. But my thought is that it could be provided here at the closest stairwell to the closest 5-step rise to the elevator, and the other path of travel, the other stairwell, could be used for the able-bodied who don't need a lift. It seems like there's plenty of room here in this hallway to me. I'd like to know the width of that opening between the URM walls. It seems to me that if there's more than enough room here that the elevation from the raised office block could be extended through that opening into the hallway, creating a 5-foot landing that gives plenty of room for accessibility, and then still room for the lift to get to that office door. So if there's room, I believe it's 36 inches to get, I'd have to double check, but what maybe Chief Building Official Stuffler could tell us, what's the wheelchair, the ADA or CBC requirement for a wheelchair to be able to pass through that opening in the URM, and perhaps the applicant can tell me what space is available there.
I think one of the first questions we have to ask is the second floor part of the area of alteration for this permit that's under consideration?
I thought I asked, and I thought it was confirmed.
Yes.
Okay, I want to make a record of that. I was going to look at the plan here and see if I could find it. I don't know the dimensions off the top of my head. I can go get Christy and have her step in for a minute if you'd like to get an answer to that during the meeting, or you could make that an additional item that we find later.
Well, in terms of whether or not we address it here and now, just for the discussion, my inclination would be to move that they be required to revisit this lift issue and come back, or alternatively, if they were just agree to do it, then we could settle the case today.
Okay, with that understood, let me have Christy step in, or I'll see if she's here. Hang on.
This is Jim Marston. While we're waiting for Christy, I just have a question for the appellant. I'm a little bit confused on this $58,000 estimate for the lift. On the one hand, you have an estimate for that amount of money, On the other hand, we're being told it's infeasible to do. I don't know who you got the estimate from, but you can't have an estimate to do something for 58 and then say it can't be done. So I'm kind of concerned on that. And it seemed like from what the little homework I did, other people would quote a much lower number. So I kind of like what Mr. Koons said, was either do the lift and get your exemption on the elevator, or come in with 3 estimates and see if someone can actually put one in. There's probably no sense for us to discuss the walls and all that, whether it can be done or not. Let's get a true contractor to come in and say, hey, I can give you an elevator lift for X. But right now, you're only, let me just finish here. Right now, you're spending less than 10% of the total budget on accessibility. This would bring it up to the proper amount, and I just wonder why you have a $58,000 estimate for something that you also say you can't do. So could you clarify that for me, please?
Yes, of course. So that was an estimate that the original contractor who built out the space gave us to just provide the lift itself and the labor to install it. And then when we went in to try and put in the lift to do the site assessment and make sure we could put in the lift during the original project for opening the center, they found that they could not get all of the equipment to fit properly within that space. And so we didn't proceed with it, but we did have the cost put together for it, because the intent was to do it previously, but we did find that we could not proceed. So depending on what the board decides, you know, I'm happy to get it priced out in terms of adding that lift in. But I would have to go back to IWG so they could understand what the implications are. You know, I don't feel like it's we're trying to skirt around it. But you know, I'm more than happy to take a look at the numbers if that's what we need to do.
So just so for your awareness, I went and looked at the price of such lifts, and I found a wide range. Most were between $3,000 and $15,000 just for the equipment that would handle this application, and the vast majority of them were around a median of $5,000. So I find the $58,000 estimate to be questionable in my mind.
Okay, understood. Just to keep in mind that it takes more than just the equipment itself. There's power, there's the labor of putting it in, and the all of that cost. So I understand where you're coming from. But again, if need be, we'll go back and we'll get it bid out again, and we can bring that back to the board.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Jose.
My original concerns are what the other board members have expressed. And I just have a couple of follow-up questions. Mm-hmm. And so I echo what their concerns are and what they've said. A couple of more like technical questions, I guess, is number one, were the interior walls specifically addressed in the historical report?
What historical report are you referring to?
Well, this is a historical building. There has to be some kind of report done or some kind of put in a registry. In order to be put in the registry, there has to be some kind of report done, defining the elements that makes it historic. Were there elements also the interior walls?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to check with the building owner and then come back to you on that.
So it's a possibility that the interior walls are not affected. It's a possibility.
I mean, yeah, there is a possibility. But just for clarification, when I'm speaking in terms of this building being historic, I mean, I'm referencing the age of the building and the age of the build out of the interiors. That provides limitations sometimes in what you can do in terms of construction.
I understand that part, and that could be solved through engineering if that's the case. I just want to make sure that if there is something identified in the historic report, that we honor that. So if that was something that the interior walls were noted as being the historical feature, then that needs to be mentioned, whether to your benefit or just the benefit of the discussion.
Yep.
The other question is, in that it doesn't sound like it, but I want to just confirm. You provided a quote for that lift, and it was determined it was infeasible. Was there an feasibility report on the structural end to show that enlarging that opening, it appears to be a CMU wall, that it would be structurally infeasible?
I would have to look at the original project documentation. I don't have that handy at the moment. I know that when they originally went to put it in, they found that they couldn't make it work. And I'm sorry, I don't have that readily available, but I will be more than happy to dig through that documentation and provide the board what it needs.
Okay. And just going off the top of my head, Andrew will confirm this, but I seem to recall that 32 inches clear is what you need to pass through an opening in order to meet accessibility. It does appear like you have some room adjacent there. Again, I echo what the previous board members stated, and I think is warrant exploring putting a lift in there. There's various price ranges, and trying to, instead of having that the accommodation at the other floor, which was recommended based on the previous scope of work, that you explore the option of providing a lift there.
So, Mr. Chair and board members, Christy Foreman, our plan check supervisor and certified access specialist, is here. And to reinforce, I think, what Ms. Board Member Barajas just stated. So,
correct. So if you have a lift, you need to be able. It needs to be on an accessible route. So you can pinch it down to 32 inches, the accessible route at a point, which is what you're saying about at the opening where those stairs are at. So as long as you can do that and provide the lift, and it looks like you can put the lift in and have an accessible route to the lift, you should be fine.
Do we have plans that can verify the clear width opening here?
we do. They're in PDF, and we're still trying to master the tools for measuring PDFs and setting scale. So it would not be something I'd want to do in the middle of the board meeting.
Okay. Thank you. But a quick question while we still have Christy here. Assuming that there's 32-inch clear width there, is it your opinion, Christy, that what I'm imagining is that this floor be continued through the opening into the foyer, providing a 5-foot landing and a lift up to it. The one impediment to that approach might be the ceiling height above it, but it looks to be a drop ceiling. So I'd also want to see the detail on the ceiling there to see if it could be modified easily. Because at the bottom, the ceiling is elevated to about the bottom of the stairs. And if we did a 5-foot landing here over the stairs, we might have head space. But the question to Christy is, can you imagine that being a feasible solution here?
It's like you just said, that you need to make sure you have the proper clearances with the ceiling.
Right.
And that's what I would envision. If opening in that masonry wall, that's the biggest impediment. If you've got your 32 inches clear, which an accessible route is allowed to be pinched down to 32 inches, and then have your landing for the entry into the lift, you should be fine. But it's just a matter of the ceiling heights. If you can have that, the clearance, the 5-foot landing, like you said, at that lift, you have proper ceiling heights that meet code.
Okay. A quick question for Chair Spealler with his structural engineering background. What detail would you want to see to verify whether or not that opening could be widened at all? I mean, if it's just a matter of an inch shaving off of a masonry wall, that might not even create a problem with load-bearing calculations and whatnot. Might be a pretty much just an aesthetic fix, right?
Yeah, I think in end she'd be okay. So Nick, so I see an office here, it's 210F. Is that I'm trying to figure out, you'd be increasing the opening between that stair there?
I'm looking at, it looks like there's a large masonry wall that blocks half the stairwell.
Okay, that little piece, right.
Yeah, so I'm looking at widening that. Now, I can't imagine why that would there unless it was at least partially structural. It seems to be quite an impediment to the stairwell. But if we have the 32-inch clear or close to it without the handrail, because if we put in a lift, then we don't have a handrail here.
Okay.
Then I would be inclined to advocate for that, especially if we can do it anywhere near within the 20% budget.
Okay, so the lift would replace the stairs. We couldn't have both there, is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, and well, that's one approach, but I can also imagine a vertical, an incline lift that folded up against that north wall, and allowed, pedestrian access adjacent in the same space that the lift occupies.
Jose
So-
here. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Just to also clarify, and what I was envisioning, yes, I would say removing those stairs completely. It appears that the egress path, the travel distance would not be a problem, just without doing a true plan review type situation. But if you eliminate those stairs, it does not appear to be an issue. I may be wrong if you get into a dead end situation with a corridor, but it appears that eliminating those stairs would not be an issue, and that was what I was envisioning with the lift.
Okay, thank you. So yes, so my question I think was answered that I had before, and if we're going to be removing, more than 10% of that URM wall, I would say this would be technically infeasible, even 12 inches, but if just a couple of inches, it'd be okay. So when they do these seismic upgrades for these URM buildings, they utilize all those masonry walls, and once you start cutting openings in them, you can't use that masonry wall anymore. You have to replace it with a concrete reinforced, current code compliant shear wall that would take the place of that masonry wall at that location. So, but I think a couple of inches could be feasible. Do we have any other comments from the board members?
Yes, just bringing myself alive again here. I had a question that I wanted to resurrect. I have listened. Couple comments. One, I have a lot of regard for Elizabeth Sorgman's work. I know that she puts out good information. The second thing I picked up is that there has been previous work by this tenant, and this is yet another phase of work. I would just like to know, before we keep kicking the can down the road, what is the total appearance of this project at build out? I know that it wasn't what you did initially because we're talking about this now. Where are we going with this building, and what realistically, should we expect to see?
Yeah, and that was the question you had asked previously. There are no plans to make any additional modifications to this building. This was the phase 2 of that original center opening. The only thing that we would see in the future is updates of finishes, which we actually did while we did this second expansion. So you would see carpet being replaced and paint on the walls. Those are the only changes we would be seeing.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions by the board to the applicant or staff?
This is Jim. I just kind of want to summarize and ask a question to the applicant. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any problem if we move to give you the elevator exemption or give you waiver, whatever you want to call it? Sorry, Andrew. If you get 3 quotes from people who could do the wheelchair lift and also information from a structural engineer, if it's totally infeasible, then of course that's a moot point. But if you can get 3 quotes and find that it's in your 20% or near the 20% budget, and it is feasible, I think I would like to see that. So I think that's what we should be working for here. Is that acceptable to you before we even discuss a motion?
The only thing is that I would have to go back to the tenant, IWG, and just get their approval on expenditures for an increase in the expense to do that, in terms of actually executing if we find that it's feasible. But I have no problem going back and getting additional pricing if that's what the board requests.
Okay. But if we request that, then you have to do it. Okay, go ahead, Nick.
If I can, Jim, I think I would be inclined to bring forth a motion that was structured to provide the ratification contingent upon the lift at this time. That gives the applicant an immediate path forward. And if the applicant is not able to do a lift, then I would ask that they be required to come back and show why this is technically infeasible and what methods to remedy the issue have been investigated. And I'd want to see some, more than just one quote, like you said, a couple different people's opinions, because it's really easy to find someone who give you a high quote. And I'd want to know, I would want to see the structural limitations that we could verify.
Andrew, do you have any comments before we prepare for a motion here?
No, I would just recommend, Mr. Chair, that you are real clear about where we're at in the agenda and whether the appellant's presentation is over, because it sounds like we're starting to have discussion amongst board members.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions to the applicant by the board members? All right, thank you, Shanna and Louis. All right, so now the board members have a chance to discuss this among ourselves. My feeling is that the lift on the second floor, if that can be done with just removing a couple inches of URM, that may be something that would be considered technically feasible. And what I think we should ask in our motion is that if we do decide to have the applicant pursue the lift, that we want to have a structural engineer's report on the feasibility and the cost, and then have a complete cost for engineering and, of course, the installation, engineering and structural work, and then, of course, the installation of the lift itself.
Greta, are you going to say it?
Yeah, sorry. If I could just jump in with point of order, we should also remember to do public comment.
Yes. Okay. So before we discuss this amongst ourselves, I would like to open up for public comment at this time.
And I see that we do have members of the public participating. I do not see raised hands at this point.
So if there are any members of the public that wish to speak, there is an option where you can click on the raised hand and you have a chance to speak.
And I'm not seeing raised hands.
Okay, then we'll close public comment and we'll open up the comment between the board members and discussion. Do we have any discussion by any other board members?
Yeah, sorry, Jose here. Since the applicant is using exception 8 out of the 11B 2.024 to provide either equivalent facilitation or, in this case, because they exceed the adjusted construction costs, need to provide 20% at minimum, and they're only providing 9.4. It's not quite clear that it is infeasible to put that lift. I think because of that, and being so low, 9.4, that definitely need to pursue the lift. And I agree with, I believe it was Mr. Koons who, Board Member Koons, that suggested that we approve the elevator ratification contingent to the lift.
Okay, any other discussion by the board members?
I have a question for staff. Just regarding process. If this board were to pass a motion to approve the ratification contingent upon a lift, do we need to provide any other stipulation on how they can come back to show that that this is technically infeasible, or would that just be, part of their rights anyway?
Mr. Chair and board members, you could have a motion, you could pass a motion and make a decision to ratify the hardship contingent upon the installation of a lift. If the applicant looks into that and determines that the cost associated with that is greater than the 20%, they can always appeal the decision of my office to enforce your decision, and they could come back to you as an appeal. So it wouldn't necessarily be a hardship ratification revision. It would just be their appealing our enforcement of the decision. And that would open up an opportunity to discuss other options or whatever the board and the appellant want to discuss.
Okay, so the appellant is aware that if it comes back to us as a new appeal, that we would want to see in order to grant an appeal on the basis of infeasibility, or, well, I guess infeasibility wouldn't come to us, but on a new hardship. So I don't think we need to include that in any motion that we might bring forth today.
I agree, in case you're wondering.
This is Jim Marston. I'm just worried that they might come back with a statement that it's infeasible. I would like to see that from at least 2 to 3 unrelated companies that would say we could do it for X amount of dollars. I don't want them to just come back and say it's infeasible. That's my
That's a
fear.
fair point. You know, technically, infeasibles don't necessarily come through this board. So
Right.
how can we safeguard against that?
Well, I like to see it from several people, first of all.
I'm asking staff as a point of process. How do we safeguard against this an end run around this decision as on a technically infeasible determination?
So that's where you could make a condition of your motion, of your condition of your approval that provided that the lift is installed, they don't need to return. But if they feel that the installation of the lift is technically infeasible, they would need to come back and revisit the decision of the board.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other comments or discussions that the board would like to have? Okay, at this point, we'll close the board discussion, and we need a motion from the board to affirm, deny, or amend the decision of the chief building official with respect to the approval of the unreasonable hardship. Do I have a motion?
I move to amend, but I need a moment to formulate my motion.
Okay.
Question, my page just went blank. Is there any videos up right now or cameras on?
This is Greta, Jim. No, we have just this subject title slide up on the screen.
Okay. The one that says 7 West Figueroa.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
No problem.
Okay, I think I have a motion that summarizes what we're trying to achieve here. So I move to ratify the hardship waiver for the elevator contingent upon the installation of a platform lift to the raised offices on the second floor. Alternatively, the appellant may return to this board with a thorough cost analysis, including structural analysis and 3 competitive bids to consider. Sorry, I guess I stopped short of it. To consider this a hardship.
Nick, this is Jim. You mentioned a lift, but did you also want to put in the incline lift?
We could ask, we could, I would say that either an incline lift or a vertical platform lift would be acceptable. So I don't think it's, I did specify platform.
Yeah.
Let me start over. I withdraw that motion. And I'm going to complete my sentence. Okay, I move to ratify the hardship waiver for the elevator contingent upon the installation of a wheelchair lift, vertical or inclined, to the raised offices on the second floor. Alternatively, the appellant may return to this board with a thorough cost analysis and structural analysis, including 3 competitive bids for further consideration.
Thank you, Nick. Do we have a second on the motion?
I have one question for Andrew. Do we have to say we have to also say we're affirming their front access, not just the elevator, but the main entrance? Do we have to say that in our motion?
No.
Okay.
As a point of discussion on this proposed motion, it seems to me that while the appeal appears to cover the front door, I would say that that's a moot point because it has been resolved through an alternative means.
Correct. And I'd also like to point out that we don't have a second yet, so the motion's not on the floor for discussion.
Can I get a second?
So Nick, for clarity, can you repeat your motion since we've had some discussion in between? So let's repeat the motion and then I need a second.
Can I also ask as a point of order, I guess I should turn on my video. Staff, would it be okay if I copied and pasted this motion into the chat window for the entire board to read and for staff to be able to include in the report?
I'm going to leave that to Greta and Maria, who have put this together. As far as I'm concerned, it's fine. I don't know if there's anything technical that prohibits that from a Brown Act standpoint. Greta and or Maria, is what someone puts in the chat to everyone box available for everyone to see?
If the board member were to select everyone so that everyone can see it, then everybody should be able to see it. Although actually, I'm not sure that someone who is simply calling in without joining through the application would be able to see the chat box. So I can't say for certain actually that everybody could see it.
That's a good point. So we would have to read the motion either way.
Okay. The motion reads, I move to ratify the hardship waiver for the elevator contingent upon the installation of a wheelchair lift, vertical or inclined, to the raised offices on the second floor. Alternatively, the appellant may return to this board with a thorough cost analysis and structural analysis, including 3 competitive bids for further consideration.
Thank you, Nick, for that motion. Do I have a second on the motion?
I second the motion.
The motion is seconded by Jose Barajas. All in favor say yay, and all opposed say nay, and I'll call out the names. Nick Koons.
Yay.
Jose Barajas.
Yay.
Jeff Hornbuckle.
Chair Spealler, board members, Jeff Hornbuckle is not voting on this particular item.
Yeah, you're right. So that includes John Maloney also. Okay. Next is Jim Marston.
Yay.
Paul Spealler. Yay. All opposed? No, there's no opposed, so the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, we missed one vote, I think.
Oh, who did I miss?
Mr. Langhorne.
Yay.
Mr. James Langhorne, yay. Okay, do we need to recount that vote? No, okay. We have a unanimous decision. All were in favor. We need a motion from the board to adjourn. Then we will use roll call for the vote. Please use your cameras if possible. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it, Jim Marston.
Thank you, Jim. Call to a vote. Jose Barajas,
Aye.
Jeff Hornbuckle. Oh, sorry, Jeff. Nick Koons,
Okay.
James Langhorne,
Okay.
Jim Marston,
Okay.
Paul Spealler. Aye. Motion to adjourn is unanimous. Thank you, everybody. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
you.
Great job. Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you, Chair
so
and
much.
Paul. Thank you, gals.
All right.
It
Okay.
worked pretty good.